Okay, good afternoon and good evening to those of you who are joining us very late, maybe from across the globe here. My name is Nicola Hobby. I am the Senior Director of Portfolio and Account Management here at BAO Systems, and this is our last session of day 2 of the symposium, but we are ending on a very strong note. I am really excited to welcome Kayla Stankiewicz from FHI 360 and Sutembe Beko. Hang on, I got my notes here. In Renda, who is a technical consultant for FHI 360, who are here to talk to us today about a standard HIV metadata package that they developed under the EPIC program. The EPIC program stands for Meeting Targets and Maintaining Epidemic Control. This is a USAID and PEPFAR funded initiative that FHI 360 has been managing. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Kayla to kick us off.
Great, thanks, Nicola. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. And as Nicola said, thank you all for joining the late session today. As she mentioned, in this session, my colleagues and I are going to be talking about the development and rollout of a standardized DHIS2 metadata package for HIV programs. Let's see if I can advance. There we go. So you're going to be hearing from 3 of us today. So this metadata package was developed by FHI 360, and it's available on our website. It's not the WHO metadata package around HIV that just came out. This is different and works across the range of HIV services and doesn't focus just on HIV positive people. So FHI 360 contracted BAO Systems to help design and develop this tracker. And let's see, let me hide that. So today we're going to tell you about the background of why we wanted to design a standard metadata package, what key design considerations we took in developing that package. Then you'll hear from Antoine about achieving data exchange between the tracker and aggregate data models. Then you'll hear from Sutembe Beko about his experience in Zambia, customizing and rolling out the standard metadata package. And finally, we'll come back to me and I'll talk about some of our lessons learned throughout the process. So just briefly, a little bit of background. FHI 360 has been working in the HIV space for over 30 years. We are a large international development company, and we work in other sectors as well. But today we're going to be talking specifically about HIV. And we've been working with DHIS2 since its inception. Over the last 7 years, we've developed a lot of individual country trackers for countries that we work where we have HIV programs. So this process has been very inefficient. We have really started from scratch in each of these countries, looking at what kind of data they need to collect, and then building up their individual trackers from there. While ultimately we have very good trackers in all of these countries, it's been a time-consuming process, a costly process, and it's made it really difficult for us to integrate across countries because the metadata in each of these countries differs. So with all that in mind, we decided to create a standardized metadata package specifically in DHIS2 tracker for HIV programs to help scale up the use of DHIS2 tracker across our countries. So the result of this was one metadata package that is available, as I said, on our website. This package includes 4 programs and 15 program stages. And I'm not going to go into the details of all of the content of the tracker in this presentation. We're trying to focus it a little more on the development process and what we learned from developing such a big metadata package. But if you want to learn more about the content or see a demo of the tracker or play around on our demo site, you can go to this website. And I think some of my colleagues are in the chat and they can probably provide that link for you. So next I'm going to some of the key design considerations we had when developing this HIV metadata package. We developed a system to collect the continuum of data on the continuum of HIV services. We didn't want to just collect data for HIV positive people or HIV negative people. We wanted to be able to collect data across the continuum of care. And this in DHIS2, this specifically makes it easier for us to calculate indicators across these different program stages. So someone reached by our program might be HIV negative when we first reach them. But if they become HIV positive, we want to be able to use the data that was collected while they were HIV negative in conjunction with the data that's collected when they're HIV positive, and having that all in one program makes it easier to do that. We really wanted to develop the tracker to promote better data use among our users. So to do that, we developed a series of built-in dashboards that were targeted towards different user groups. So this is an example of a dashboard that we would show to program managers. It's showing progress towards targets, and you'll see that we have dashboards developed specifically for higher level people who don't necessarily need access to the individual level data that's available on the tracker. So we show them dashboards that are completely de-identified and just show high level project performance. We also heard that people were interested in analyzing data by user. So in HIV programs, peer workers are often used to support individual clients or cohorts of clients to ensure that they stay engaged in HIV services. So an example of a peer worker would be a sex worker who maybe works with other sex workers to ensure that they get regularly HIV tested and stay on prevention services. So it would be really valuable for peer workers to be able to see just the people that they've enrolled in the system and that they support directly. But this isn't something that's natively built into DHIS2. So I had mentioned earlier that there are 4 programs as part of the standard metadata package. This is one of the 4 programs. It's called the Peer Worker Program. And this program allows you to enroll a peer worker who supports your project into the program, and then link that peer worker to clients enrolled in the HIV program using the relationships functionality. And peer workers, and this enables kind of twofold analysis. We're able to have peer workers query lists of the clients that they support, so the clients that they have relationships with in the system. And further, clinic managers can look at all of the peer workers who support their clinic and see performance by peer worker. In that way, they can target supportive supervision to the peer workers that need additional support. I just wanted to point out that accessing the relationships between different tracked entities in the system isn't a built-in function in DHIS2. So we actually had to develop custom reports to enable these analyses. This is an example of one of those custom reports, what it could look like. Note that all the data I'm presenting today are data from our demo site, and they're fake data that we made up for presentation purposes. So lastly, we have dashboards for that are developed for users who work closely with individual clients. And these are mostly line lists of individuals enrolled in the system who may need additional follow-up or support. We have line lists of people who have upcoming appointments, people who have tested positive but haven't been linked to treatment, and people who are on treatment but have run out of their drugs since the last time they came in for a pickup or appointment. And these line lists can be used on a daily basis to understand who might need additional follow-up. We also really wanted to reduce the data entry burden of the people supported or the people using our system. HIV programs historically report a lot of data. I know we heard from PEPFAR about DATM earlier. All of our projects are required to report into DATM quarterly, and they're required to report into our headquarters-based system monthly. So we've designed the standard tracker to automatically calculate all of the indicators that we report into these two systems. And we've developed a script that transforms the individual level data into the aggregate data format that's required for reporting. So Antoine will talk a little bit about this process later, but we wanted this to be built into the system to make sure that we weren't increasing the data reporting burden on our users who already have to do a lot of reporting. Finally, we wanted to make sure that the system was easy to adopt across different settings. So throughout the design process, we engaged teams from across FHI 360 and from different countries that our HIV programs work in. We also work with a lot of people who go into the field and don't always have a secure internet connection. Apparently, I don't have a secure internet connection in the US. So we wanted to optimize the Android or the metadata package for use on the Android app, which we did, and many of our countries are using the Android app to collect data. We also translated the system into 4 common languages and are working with individual countries to translate it into additional local languages. So from here, I'm going to pull up a video that is just going to let you see Antoine and Sitimbeko's sections.
Hi everyone, it's Antoine from BAO System. In this part, we will discuss the data exchange process between tracker and aggregate data model. We will first look at how the data exchange is working, but also we will discuss the value that this process will bring to your package. First, the question is, why do we need this? HIV programs have extensive reporting needs, and aggregating tracker data could be quite often cumbersome. That's why we've been asked to automate the reporting between the standard tracker and 2 aggregate datasets, the FHI 360 monthly datasets and the PEPFAR quarterly datasets. Another problem we have was to create anonymous data from patient-level data, especially to make the results available among different stakeholders. Let's now have a look to the data exchange process. It's a multiple steps process. The first step is to combine the tracker data into program indicators. The program indicators will reflect the structure of your reports. If you need to report 10 elements to your donors, you will have to create 10 program indicators. Then these program indicators will be turned into indicators or aggregate indicators. Why? Because we are leveraging a native DHIS2 feature called the aggregate data exports that allows to map an indicators to a data element. So for each PI created, you will have to create 1 indicator. The next step is to map each indicators with a data element and its disaggregation. Disaggregation of a data element is category option combos, COC, or attribute option combos, AOC. Let's take an example. This PI, PPPrev non-positive, gives you the number of people receiving prevention intervention who were known as HIV positive at enrollment for a specific age group and sex. We understand that we need to create 1 program indicators per disaggregation required in your dataset. In that case, we have 1 PI by age group and sex. So if we have 10 age groups and 2 category per sex, we will have to create 20 program indicators. So what do we need to reach with tracker data into a format that can be imported in a dataset? We need to take into consideration the following components: the attribute option combos. We have an example here with implementing partner and funding sources. The category option combos, for example, age group and sex, and of course, the data element. If we come back to our PI example, we can see how we map program indicators and a data element along with this disaggregation. In our case, the data element is PEPFAR non-positive. We have the disaggregation, the COC, category option combination, age group and sex, and attribute option combination, IP1, which means implementing partner number 1. As explained, for each program indicator, we have to create one indicator. We use indicator to store the mapping elements needed for the integration. The mapping elements of the integration are the data elements, along with the COC and DOC of the required disaggregation. The mapping elements are stored as an indicator attribute against each indicator created. As an example, if I want to map the PEPFAR non-positive for a specific age group and sex, I will have to specify in the indicator attribute the UID of the data elements, the UID of the AOC, and the UID of the category option combination. Then a custom script will read this attribute and push the data from the program indicators to the data elements. The main issue and challenge with this approach is first to create all the required program indicators along with indicators, but also to fill the mapping elements and to maintain the mapping. That's why we have developed a DHIS2 app. We call it PDAC app, which is freely available on the DHIS2 App Store. This application is used to link a program indicator to a data element in a specific dataset. This is used to generate a copy of the program indicators for each disaggregation assigned to a data element in a dataset. The application will also help you to maintain the mapping between the different elements, especially when you have to update or to create or to add one disaggregation to your dataset. The result of the data exchange process is not only having tracker data stored as aggregate data elements, but it's also about combining the analytical power of program indicators and the flexibility of the aggregate data model. So it means that you can now use the DataVis app to break down value of a program indicators by any of the applied disaggregation, such as sex, age, and so on. So you can now create powerful visualization based on patient data. If you have any question or need any details regarding the data exchange process, you can find my contacts on the event page of the symposium. I thank you for your attention and wish you a very good day.
Good day, everyone. My name is Astumbako Nyirenda, and I'm a technical officer on the Open Doors project. I will take you through our experience with the customization and rollout of the standard HIV tracker. So a brief background on the Open Doors project is that the project has been active in 8 districts since 2016 in Zambia. There are 14 project sites that are currently active, and activities are coordinated through 9 implementing partners. This project tracks client-level information on selected key populations who access healthcare services. So stakeholders on the Open Doors project saw the need to migrate from our legacy system to a new system for several reasons. One being that our project relied heavily on paper-based media for our data storage. We also maintained an electronic database, which was a distributed database across our project sites. This required extensive effort during extraction, transformation, and loading of data before analysis could be performed. Another factor that contributed to the need was that there was a delayed review of new project data due to a time lag between our paper-based data entry and our electronic data entry. So some considerations of note that were taken into account during system selection were that our new system would have to support the FHI TQLA approach, that's total quality leadership and accountability towards our activities. The new system would also have to support client level tracking of data across all the services that the project provides. And the system would have to facilitate real-time data reviews as well. So after the standard tracker was selected as the new system that would be adopted by the project, we had to go through a process of adapting this standard tracker to our local needs. And part of this involved reviewing our legacy data collection tools and frameworks, as well as our client level model, and mapping this model onto the standard tracker to ensure that we would be able to collect the elements that our project is interested in. After the customization process was complete, we carried out a data import, which involved creating a mapping between the legacy data elements and the data elements on DHIS2. We then used the custom scripted solution to create a standard import file that could be used on the BAO import foundry tool that allows import of tracker-based data on DHIS2. So some of the challenges, or at least the challenge of note that we experienced, was that there was a difference in how elements were designed in our legacy system and on the standard tracker. And this presented a challenge during our import of data. So after we completed the data import as well as the customization, we proceeded to train a cohort of end users. So we trained 150 participants through a 5-day training schedule where we had focused practical activities on Android devices as well as on laptops. Our cohort of users had a spread of people with varying technical knowledge and ability. Some feedback of note or statistics of note were that 73% of our participants had never heard of DHIS2 before our training began. 92% of those participants as well had never used the system before in their work experience. At the end of our training, 95% of our participants believed that the training was relevant to their jobs, which we believed was a positive thing. So after we completed our training activities, we had a plan to roll out the application to all our project sites. Unfortunately, this plan has been delayed due to COVID-19, wherein the travel restrictions that have been imposed in our locality. And this is sort of emphasized due to the point that our stakeholders believed that a face-to-face rollout would be preferred over virtual rollout activities. This decision was due to experience with online systems that the project has used before. Thank you.
Great. So I hope you can all still hear me. I think we're a little bit behind because of the technical issues that we experienced. So Nicola, is it okay if I spend 5 or 6 minutes talking through lessons learned and then we can
absolutely.
Great. So we wanted to really come back and reflect on all of those design decisions that I talked about in the beginning and see how they played out in real life. So now that we have countries adopting the tracker, what is their overall experience? So lessons learned around implementation, one of our big assumptions was that developing or standardizing our metadata would allow us to really quickly scale amongst our HIV programs in different countries. And this has really turned out to be true. As I mentioned at the beginning, we developed 9 trackers in the last 7 years at FHI, specifically among HIV programs. And in the last 6 months, we've been able to roll this out amongst 9 additional countries. And each of those countries is at a different stage of adoption, as you heard from Sid and Beko just now. But I think overall, we can say this was quite a big success. The time to adapt the tracker has really varied widely for each context. So you heard a little from Antoine about the process that we use for integrating data. Whenever a new indicator is added, quite a few program indicators and indicators need to be added to the system, and that can make configuring the system quite complex. We've also experienced challenge working in the remote work context. Given time, I won't go into details of that. I think a lot of people have experienced similar challenges due to COVID-19. We thought it was important to mention also that differences between systems didn't always require changes in DHIS2. So if a country had a specific way that they collected data that didn't align with how the tracker was designed, sometimes they would say that the tracker was actually more comprehensive than their current data collection system and adapt their in-country systems to match the tracker. So that was actually really promising feedback that even though we've built a very complex and comprehensive system, people see a lot of value in that complexity. So we also reflected on the data exchange process. Overall, this process has worked really well, but there were some things that we didn't anticipate. One thing that I didn't really think through in the beginning was the fact that the data are actually stored in multiple places once we move the data from the tracker to the aggregate model. So for example, if you wanted to look at the number of people tested for HIV, you could find that from a tracker data element. You could find that from an aggregate data element. You could find that from a program indicator and an indicator. So trying to explain that to end users and helping them understand the difference takes a little more training than we anticipated. The process also creates a lot of dependencies and a lot of metadata. So the reason that we have to use both program indicators and indicators is because there's a bug in DHIS2. We actually found out today that that bug's going to be fixed in the next release. So we actually may be able to simplify that integration process. Finally, just a little additional feedback from end users. I had mentioned that we developed a supplemental program called the Peer Worker Program to allow people to look at data by peer worker and the cohorts that they support. In theory, this works, but it's still a little challenging for people to look at these data because they have to look at them through custom reports. They can't be accessed through the built-in analytics apps in DHIS2. We also heard some limitations with the mobile app, specifically challenges with long sync times, especially in low resource or low connectivity settings. Most of our users said that they prefer the web version to the mobile app. So in summary, creating one standardized system really worked well for us. It enabled us to quickly scale up DHIS2 tracker among our HIV programs. And as we roll this out in different countries, we continue to learn more, and we're able to both improve the standard tracker package system, as well as use that learning to apply to other projects. So I will leave you with this. You can follow this link to get some more resources on the HIV tracker metadata package. You can also contact us at this generic DHIS2 email address at FHI, or feel free to reach out to me directly. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so despite the technical difficulties, there was a very strong finish here. This is super interesting. I have a ton of questions. Annabelle has a great question that I actually wanted to tag a couple of things onto. As we know, MER indicators change often, sometimes quarterly. You know, they have tried to move more towards at least semi-annual or even annual, but you know how PEPFAR works. So her question is, how can you talk about the planning and the maintenance, given that there are these frequent changes? I was thinking along similar lines, particularly since we know that potentially with these new features that are coming out within DHIS2 around the ability to do cross-program calculations. What are you guys anticipating in terms of how you're going to maintain this? And what does that sort of ongoing, deployment process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm experiencing a little delay, so please let me know if you can't hear me. People familiar with PEPFAR programs know that they update their indicator reference guidance at least annually. We recently just received that updated guidance just a few days ago. So updating our metadata on an annual basis is something that we already have to do with our aggregate systems. So we're planning to do that same level of maintenance in the tracker system. The great thing about how the tracker is designed is that even if, for instance, the age categories that we have to report into change, the underlying data that's being collected in the tracker doesn't necessarily need to change, right? We're still collecting people's ages. We'll just have to change the way that we integrate or report into the aggregate system. So in that sense, it's good that we won't necessarily need to change all of the program stages and the tracker data model on an annual basis. We may just have to update the integration routes.
Yeah, Sittenbeko, you raised a really good point. You were talking about customization and how at the local level there was some degree of customization. What did you guys find within the different countries people actually wanted to change or add? What sort of was the biggest request, whether it was in disaggregations or attributes? What were you seeing?
Thanks for the question, Nina. I think it's a bit hard to give a general answer on that because it's mostly context specific. And it sort of reaches into the question about the MER changes as well, because even with these like these localized contexts, you'll find that there are changes that will be required by those in-country teams. And we have sort of had to make this collaborative process with the business solutions team, so to say, as the in-country team, that will enable us to have this continuous process of improvement, so to say. Yeah. And
this becomes really a circular process, right? Where
yes,
there's design, and then there is workflow and data flow changes, retraining, design, workflow, data flow changes, and it just keeps going on and on and on.
Never ending.
Never ending, right. And, that coupled with the fact that the MER indicators change, I think that's one of the things that, in the donors panel, we were talking about, they were talking about that they wanted to do more of these standard metadata packages. And this is an example of where, yes, you have been really successful in able to deploy a very complex project rapidly, and that's a huge success. But it will always come with this maintenance and care and feeding cost that is part of it. And so I think one thing that, and maybe Kayla or Sittenbeko, you guys could speak to, what expectations are we setting, for each of the countries in terms of how they will continue to support these programs and systems locally?
Yeah, I mean, these are all really good points. And I mean, the reality is that as soon as we deploy this in a given country, the metadata starts to change, right? We have a standardized package, which allows us to deploy this very quickly, but we do have customization that's needed in each country, which causes some long-term differences in what's in the system. So we do need to maintain resources at the within FHI to continue to support these systems long term. They're not just something that can just be deployed and run steady state forever. We've also focused a lot on in-country capacity building. So we're building up teams in each country to ensure that they're able to manage their systems on an ongoing basis. We've also started a working group within FHI 360 where we bring all of the teams that are using the standard tracker together and try to learn from each other's experiences. You caught us at a great point because, as I said, the MERC guidance just came out yesterday. So maybe at the next conference, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that first refresh process.
So one of the things that I know happens, and part of this is because of limitations within DHIS2, but these tracker programs generate massive amounts of metadata in order to be able to build the indicators, across all of these different sort of reporting requirements, whether it is USAID specific or it is PEPFAR specific, because I know that there are slight differences between what USAID wants plus what PEPFAR wants. How did you guys help take what primarily has been served, as meeting the reporting needs for PEPFAR, but also how have you helped the program teams take this analysis back and start to actually use it internally to inform their programming more so on like the day-to-day or operational and kind of strategic intervention aspect?
Yeah, so the reality is, while we designed this specifically to meet the reporting requirements of PEPFAR, we also wanted to design it so that non-PEPFAR programs could also adopt it. And in some of our countries where it's actually being adopted at the national level, rather than just among the FHI 360 supported facilities. So just to note that it's not just a PEPFAR product and it can be used more widely. We've also worked with each individual country to ensure that they know how to develop their own reports and custom dashboards. So each country has built upon the dashboards that come prepackaged in the standard tracker and developed dashboards that are relevant to their given program. So many of them have made dashboards specific to peer workers, for instance, with data that those peer workers need to see on a daily basis to improve their programs. We also recognize that there are some limitations to the analytics which can be done within DHIS2, which has been touched on some of the other sessions today as well. And we're working right now to pull de-identified tracker data into a Power BI data model, which will do some more advanced analytics with our data. So we're hoping to publish those Power BI dashboards right back into the DHIS2 tracker system so that people who log into DHIS2 can see the more advanced dashboards.
Okay, so we got a couple of questions coming in. What processes are you putting in place to support DHIS2 upgrade/version control across the countries implementing the package? This is a great question.
That is a great question. So we have a standard version that we use across all of our countries, and most of our servers are hosted either on Azure or on local servers, depending on which country or what the country specific requirements are. But our general process is to stay aligned with the datum version. So since we report into datum, we usually upgrade when they upgrade. We have a process of fully testing, not just on one of the trackers, but on each individual tracker on a development server before pushing any upgrades through. And we've actually found some bugs that make it really hard to run the standard tracker on the most recent version. So we're running 2.35 right now.
Yep, I know about those bugs, and I know that they're going to be fixed quickly. All right, Catherine is asking a question here, thinking about an earlier session on augmenting DHIS2. Oh, I know where this question's going. Do you see a time in the near future where maintenance of the system and the analytic requirements will outgrow the current functionality in DHIS2? Ooh, food for thought here.
Well, I mean, I think in some sense, what people want to do from an analytics perspective has already kind of outgrown DHIS2. There's a lot of interest in more advanced we call it like case profiling or machine learning within FHI 360 in general. So, and a lot of that isn't going to be accessible within DHIS2 in the near future. So we're doing a lot of that by pulling to Power BI right now, but we're also looking at other ways of integrating our data kind of across the organization.
I think Monica has a...
Maybe just additionally, before we move from that, just to mention, I mean, there's always the additional options of using the API itself. So even if like you don't have the option of using Power BI, you can work with the API to pull data out and make these custom solutions towards visualization.
Yeah, and actually, Monica has a question sort of similar along this line. She's asking, is the reason for embedding the Power BI reports in DHIS2 related to access for users who do not have the Power BI Pro license? She said, we also have a similar tool. This is a great point, and we see this frequently where some of these commercial software are cost prohibitive at scale for local users. How are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, so full disclosure, we haven't gotten to this point yet where we're actually pulling the tracker data. We're pulling it into Power BI, but we haven't been publishing our reports into DHIS2 yet. I think it's possible, but I haven't done it. But yeah, so I see your question around Power BI Pro licenses. So to do this, we would have to use the publish to web feature in Power BI, which would enable you to publish it without having someone requiring people to log in to view it. So traditionally how Power BI works, you have to log into each individual report. So if you were to put this on DHIS2, people would have to log into DHIS2 and then they would have to log into a Microsoft account to see the Power BI dashboard. So the publish to web feature allows you to skip the logging into the Microsoft account. But you have to be very careful with the kind of data that you publish using that feature and make sure that it's not accessible and behind another login, or people could theoretically get access to your data without a login.
Okay, so we are 5 minutes past the hour. I want to thank Kayla, Situmbeko, and Antoine for this really, really interesting session.